"He's got a weapon! It's a detonator!" Tiffany shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at the heavy black device in my hand. Officer Kowalski's taser laser danced directly over my heart, his finger tightening on the trigger. The entire first-class cabin scrambled in panic, convinced the black man in the charcoal hoodie was a terrorist. Tiffany smirked triumphantly. She had finally found a way to kick me out of seat 1A. But she didn't know the detonator was a satellite phone connected directly to her CEO. And I wasn't calling to surrender, I was calling to revoke the fuel contract that kept her airline in the sky. The rain lashed against the reinforced glass of JFK International Airport, turning the tarmac into a blurry watercoal of gray and steel inside the first-class cabin of Atlantic Sovereign Airlines Flight 9. The atmosphere was hermetically sealed luxury. The scent of expensive leather and conditioned air filled the space, a sharp contrast to the humid chaos of the terminal outside. Silas Grant adjusted the noise, answering headphones over his ears, closing his eyes. At 42, Silas had the kind of face that was hard to read, stoic, deeply lined around the eyes from sleepless nights, and possessing a quiet gravity that most people mistook for weariness. Today, he was dressed in a charcoal cashmere hoodie and dark jeans. No logos, no flash. To the unsharpened eye, he looked like a tired graduate student or perhaps an off-duty mechanic catching a lucky break. He wasn't. Silas was the majority shareholder and CEO of Ares Logistics, the company that currently handled the fuel contracts for half the commercial fleets on the East Coast. He had spent the last 72 hours in a boardroom in Manhattan negotiating a merger that would secure the jobs of 4,000 employees. He was exhausted. He didn't want champagne. He didn't want a hot towel. He just wanted to sleep until the wheels touched down at Heathrow. "Excuse me, sir? You need to clear the aisle. Clear." The voice was sharp, clipped, and devoid of warmth. Silas opened one eye. Standing over him was Tiffany, the lead flight attendant. Her uniform was immaculate, her blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, and her name tag gleamed under the cabin lights. She was holding a manifest, tapping a pen against it rhythmically. "I'm in my seat." Silas said, his voice a low rumble. He shifted his legs slightly to let a passenger squeeze by, though he was already well within the confines of the spacious pod of seat 1A. Tiffany didn't move. Her eyes flicked over his hoodie, then down to his scuffed leather sneakers. A microscopic sneer touched her lips. It was a look Silas had seen 1,000 times before. It was the look that asked, "How did you get in here?" "We have a lot of priority members boarding, sir," Tiffany said, her volume slightly louder than necessary. "Try to keep your elbows in. This is a premium cabin." Silas blinked. "I'm aware. That's why I bought the ticket." Tiffany let out a short, airy laugh, shaking her head as if he'd told a cute joke. "Right, just try not to clutter the area." She spun on her heel and marched toward the galley, leaving a trail of expensive perfume in her wake. Silas watched her go, a small knot of tension tightening in his gut. He had dealt with board members who wanted to gut his company, hostile takeovers, and media scandals. He could handle a rude flight attendant. He simply turned up the volume on his jazz playlist and closed his eyes again. But peace was short-lived. A commotion at the cabin door drew his attention. A man was entering loudly. He was tall, wearing a bespoke navy suit that screamed money, with a gold watch that caught the light aggressively. He was on his phone practically shouting, "No, I told you I want the merger done by Monday. I don't care who you have to fire." The man laughed, a booming, obnoxious sound. He hung up and looked around the cabin as if he owned it. This was Preston York. If you read the financial tabloids, you knew Preston. He was a hedge fund manager known for aggressive restructuring corporate speak for stripping companies for parts. Preston stopped at row 1. He looked at his boarding pass, then at seat 1B, the empty seat next to Silas, separated by the aisle, and then at seat 1A. He frowned. Behind Preston was a woman, presumably his wife, looking anxious. She was holding a boarding pass for seat 4F way in the back of the first-class section. "This is ridiculous," Preston muttered. He snapped his fingers not raised. His hand snapped his fingers at Tiffany. "You attendant come here?" Tiffany materialized instantly, her previous icy demeanor replaced by a beaming, servile smile. "Mr. York, welcome aboard. Is everything all right?" "No, it's not," Preston said, gesturing vaguely at the cabin. "My wife and I are separated. I'm in 1B. She's in 4F. We need to sit together. I need to discuss the itinerary with her." Tiffany nodded sympathetically. "I understand, Mr. York. Let me see what I can do." She scanned the cabin. It was full. Every pod was occupied. Her eyes roamed over the passengers. An elderly judge in 2AA, famous tech influencer in 2BA, sleeping diplomat in 3A. And then her eyes landed on 1A. Silas Grant, the man in the hoodie. The calculation in her eyes was visible. In her mind, the hierarchy was clear. Preston York was a high-value target, a platinum status holder, a man in a suit. Silas Grant was an anomaly, a glitch in the system. Tiffany leaned in close to Preston, whispering something. Preston glanced at Silas, looked him up and down, and smirked. "Go ahead. I'm sure he won't mind. Make it worth his while." Silas felt the air shift. He paused his music. He didn't look up, but he knew they were coming. He tightened his grip on the armrest. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was a target. Tiffany approached seat 1A with the confidence of a predator who knows the prey has nowhere to run. She didn't kneel to eye level, as was protocol for first-class service. She stood over him, looming, forcing him to crane his neck to look at her. "Sir," she said, "it wasn't a question. I need to see your boarding pass again." Silas removed his headphones. He moved slowly, deliberately. He pulled his phone out, unlocked it, and displayed the digital QR code. "Is there a problem?" Tiffany glanced at the screen but didn't scan it. "There seems to be a system error with your reservation. We have a double booking for seat 1A. Silas checked his phone. "That's impossible. I booked this seat 3 weeks ago. Full fare confirmation number XJ929 Alpha. "Computer's glitch," Sir Tiffany said, her voice dripping with fake condescension. "It happens. Unfortunately, the seat was assigned to a global services member prior to your purchase, and the system failed to update." She gestured toward Preston York, who was standing in the aisle, checking his Rolex and looking impatient. "Mr. York and his wife need to sit together. Since his status overrides your fare class, I'm going to have to ask you to move." Silas looked at Preston, then back at Tiffany. He knew exactly what this was. There was no double booking. There was no glitch. This was displacement. "Move where Silas asked calmly." Tiffany smiled a tight plastic expression. "We have a very comfortable seat available in economy plus row 22. It has extra legroom. And as a gesture of goodwill, I can offer you a voucher for $50 off your next flight." The insult was so sharp it was almost funny. Silas had paid $6,000 for this pod so he could sleep before a meeting that would decide the fate of a logistics empire. She was offering him row 22 and $50. "I'm not moving," Silas said. He put his headphones back on. Tiffany reached out and tapped him on the shoulder hard. Silas ripped the headphones off. His eyes went cold. The cabin went silent. The elderly judge in 2A lowered his newspaper. "Do not touch me," Silas said, his voice dropping an octave. "Then do not ignore me!" Tiffany snapped her mask, slipping. "Sir, let me be crystal clear. This isn't a request. This is an operational necessity. Mr. York is a diamond medallion flyer. You are holding up the departure of this aircraft. If you do not vacate this seat voluntarily, I will have you escorted off the plane by security." Preston York chimed in from the aisle, stepping forward. "Look, buddy," he said, pulling a wad of cash from his money clip. "Don't make this a thing. Here." He tossed $200 bills onto Silas's lap. "Take the cash, go back to coach, and buy yourself some new sneakers. You're out of your depth here." The bills fluttered down, landing on the dark denim of Silas's jeans. Silas looked at the money, then he looked at Preston. Pick it up, Silas said. Excuse me? Preston laughed. Pick it up. Silas didn't shout, but the command cracked through the cabin like a whip. I don't want your money and I am not leaving this seat. I suggest you take 1B and your wife takes 4F or you both get off. Tiffany's face flushed red. She pressed the intercom button on her handset. Captain, we have a disruptive passenger in first class. Level 2 threat. I need security at the gate immediately. She looked down at Silas with a triumphant glare. You wanted to play the tough guy fine. Now you're not going to economy. You're going to jail. Silas didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He simply reached into his carry-on bag and pulled out a different phone. A satellite phone. It was heavy black and looked like military hardware. You're calling your lawyer, Preston scoffed. Save it! You're done! Silas dialed a number from memory. He waited 2 rings. Edward! Silas spoke into the phone, his eyes locked on Tiffany's name tag. It's Silas. Yes, I'm on the tarmac at JFK Flight 929. I have a situation. I need you to patch me through to the Chief of Operations for Atlantic Sovereign. No, not customer service. I want the director. Wake him up. Tiffany froze. She recognized the tone. It wasn't the tone of a disruptive passenger. It was the tone of a man who gave orders that shifted stock prices. Who are you calling? She demanded, her voice wavering slightly. Silas ignored her. Yes, I'll hold. He looked at Tiffany. I'm not calling a lawyer. I'm calling the man who signs your boss's paycheck. The drama was just beginning. The plane was still attached to the jet bridge. But as far as Silas was concerned, this flight was already over. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted from awkward tension to suffocating dread. The air conditioning hummed a low mechanical drone that seemed to amplify the silence. Outside, the rain had intensified, drumming a frantic rhythm against the fuselage, as if warning everyone inside that the storm wasn't just outside. It was right here in row 1. Tiffany stood by the cockpit door, her arms crossed her chest, heaving with a performance of righteous indignation. She wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. She had cast herself as the victim, the defender of order against a chaotic element. She avoided making eye contact with Silas, staring instead at the jet bridge door waiting for her enforcers. Preston York, sensing that he had successfully bullied his way to victory, had taken seat 1B. He leaned back, sipping a pre-departure whiskey that Tiffany had hurriedly brought him, despite the captain not having given the all-clear for service. You're making a mistake, pal. Preston sneered, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. When the port authority gets on this plane, they don't ask questions. They drag. And you're going to get dragged. Silas didn't respond. He sat perfectly still. The satellite phone pressed to his ear. The line was ringing. 1 ring, 2 rings. Director Sterling's office. A crisp female voice answered. Who is this? This is Silas Grant, he said quietly, his voice steady but carrying the weight of iron. Code Black Authentication 497 Zulu. Put Arthur on now. There was a pause on the other end, a pause that spoke of sudden movement of chairs scraping back of panic. Mr. Grant, 1 moment, immediately. Silas lowered the phone to his lap but kept the line open. At that exact moment, the cabin door burst open. The heavy thud of boots on the galley floor reverberated through the small space. 2 Port Authority officers stormed in. They were large men dressed in dark blue tactical uniforms, rain glistening on their shoulders. Their hands rested near their belts, not on their weapons, but close enough to send a clear message. Where the lead officer barked, his name tag read Kowalski. He had the tired, aggressive look of a man who dealt with drunk tourists and unruly passengers all day and had 0 patience left. Tiffany stepped forward, her voice trembling with a feigned fragility. Their seat 1A, he refused to move. He became aggressive. He threw money at Mr. York, and when I tried to intervene, he grabbed my arm. It was a lie, a bold, dangerous lie. A collective gasp went through the cabin. The elderly judge in 2A lowered his reading glasses, his brow furrowed. He had seen everything. He knew Silas hadn't touched her. But before he could speak, Preston York jumped in. "She's telling the truth, officer," Preston shouted, standing up to assert dominance. "The guy is unhinged. I offered to help him out, and he went ballistic. We don't feel safe flying with him." Officer Kowalski turned his gaze toward Silas. He saw a black man in a hoodie sitting in a $6,000 seat holding a strange, bulky phone. The officer's bias, fed by Tiffany's narrative, locked into place like a pair of handcuffs. Kowalski marched down the short aisle, his partner flanking him. He stopped right in front of Silas, blocking the overhead light, casting a shadow over seat 1A. "Sir," Kowalski said, his voice a low growl, "stand up. Hands where I can see them." Silas didn't move his body, but he slowly raised his left hand palm open. In his right hand, he held the phone. "Officer," Silas said calmly, "there are cameras in this cabin. There are witnesses. I haven't touched anyone. I am a ticketed passenger. I didn't ask for your life story." Kowalski snapped. He reached for his radio. "I said stand up. You are trespassing on a federal aircraft. The crew has designated you a security threat. That means you leave or we make you leave. And if we make you leave, you're leaving in zip ties." "If you touch me," Silas said, his voice dropping so low it was almost a whisper. Yet it carried to the back of the cabin. "You will be ending your career. I suggest you wait 10 seconds. "Is that a threat?" Kowalski's hand moved to his taser. "Sir, put the phone down now. He's got a weapon." Tiffany shrieked from the galley, escalating the situation to a breaking point. "It's a detonator. Look at that phone." Adrenaline spiked in the cabin. Passengers in the rows behind began to scramble, unbuckling seatbelts, panic rising in their throats. The accusation of a detonator changed everything. It turned a seating dispute into a terrorist threat. Kowalski drew his taser. The red laser dot danced on Silas's chest right over his heart. "Drop it," Kowalski screamed. "Drop the device." Silas looked at the laser dot. He looked at Tiffany, whose eyes were wide with a mix of triumph and sudden realizing fear. She had gone too far. "It's a phone," Silas said, enunciating every syllable. "And the person on the other end is your boss's boss, Arthur Sterling, Director of Operations for Atlantic Sovereign." Silas hit the speakerphone button. The voice that came out of the device wasn't a tiny whisper. It was a booming, authoritative baritone that cut through the panic like a knife. "Officer, stand down. This is Arthur Sterling, Director of Operations. If you deploy that weapon, you will be traffic cop in Alaska by tomorrow morning." The shout was so loud, so commanding, that Kowalski actually flinched. The red dot wavered. "Is Silas Grant on the line?" the voice demanded. Silas brought the phone closer. "I'm here, Arthur. I have a taser pointed at my chest, and I have a flight attendant who just accused me of holding a detonator." Silence. Absolute terrified silence filled the cabin. Kowalski looked at the phone. He looked at Silas. He looked at Tiffany. The color was draining from Tiffany's face. She recognized the name. Arthur Sterling was a legend in the airline industry. He was the man who fired people for having the wrong color tie, let alone for creating a false security crisis. "Who is this?" Kowalski stammered, lowering the taser slightly. "I told you," Silas said. "That is Arthur Sterling, and you are about to find out why you should have checked the manifest properly." Silas held the phone out toward Officer Kowalski. "Take it." Kowalski hesitated, his training wearing with the reality of the situation. Slowly, he holstered his taser and took the heavy satellite phone. He put it to his ear. "This is Officer Kowalski, Port Authority," he said, his voice lacking its previous bravado. "Kowalski." Sterling's voice crackled loud enough for the front row to hear. "You are currently holding a weapon on Silas Grant. Do you know who Silas Grant is?" "No, sir. I was told he was a disruptive passenger in economy. I mean, he was refusing to move from first." "Silas Grant." Sterling continued, his voice dripping with icy rage. Is the CEO of Ares Logistics. Ares Logistics currently supplies 100% of the aviation fuel for Atlantic Sovereign Airlines at JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark. Mr. Grant isn't just a passenger. He is the only reason our planes have gas in the tank. Kowalski's eyes went wide. He looked down at Silas, who was calmly brushing a piece of lint off his hoodie. Now Sterling barked. Put the flight attendant on the lead. What is her name? Kowalski swallowed hard. He turned to Tiffany. She was backed against the cockpit door, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. Her name is Tiffany, Kowalski said. He walked over and shoved the phone into her shaking hands. He wants to talk to you. Tiffany took the phone as if it were made of molten lava. Mr. Sterling. Tiffany, Sterling said. The tone wasn't loud anymore. It was quiet, deadly quiet. Mr. Grant tells me you tried to move him to seat 22B. Is that correct, sir? There was a double booking. I don't lie to me, Sterling roared. I have the system logs open right now. Mr. Grant booked that seat 21 days ago. Mr. York booked his ticket 4 hours ago. There is no glitch. You tried to bounce a full fare-paying strategic partner for a platinum member because you didn't like the way Mr. Grant looked. Am I close? Tiffany couldn't speak. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. And then Sterling continued. When he refused, which was his right, you called the police and filed a false Level 2 threat report. Do you have any idea the liability you have just exposed this airline to? I was just trying to accommodate Mr. York, she whispered, tears beginning to well up in her eyes. You are relieved of duty, Sterling said. Effective immediately. You are not to perform any crew functions. You are to sit in the jump seat and touch nothing until that plane is met by my team. Tiffany lowered the phone, her hand trembling violently. She looked at Preston York. Preston wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring out the window, suddenly finding the rain very interesting. Silas reached out and took the phone back from Tiffany's limp hand. Arthur, Silas said, that's not enough. I know, Silas, Sterling said, his voice apologetic. I'll have her fired before you land in London. I'll comp your ticket. I'll ban York. We'll fix this. No, Silas said. He looked around the cabin. He looked at the passengers who had watched him be humiliated. He looked at the officer who had almost tased him. The disrespect wasn't just personal, Arthur. It was systemic. She didn't just try to move me. She tried to criminalize me, and the system jumped to help her. Silas paused. I'm invoking Clause 14 of our supply agreement. On the other end of the line, Arthur Sterling gasped. Silas, don't. That's the nuclear option that affects the whole seaboard. Clause 14. Silas repeated, Safety and compliance breach. My company does not supply fuel to entities that endanger my executives or discriminate against my staff. I consider this incident a material breach of contract. Silas, please, Sterling pleaded. Think about the schedule. I am thinking about it, Silas said coldly. I am formally suspending fuel delivery to Atlantic Sovereign Airlines at JFK. Effective now. Silas looked at the pilot, who had just opened the cockpit door to see what the commotion was. Captain Silas said you might want to check your fuel gauge. Captain Reynolds was a man of procedure. He had graying temples and a mustache that had seen 3 decades of aviation. He stepped out of the cockpit, hat in hand, looking confused. What is going on back here? Reynolds asked. Ad is asking why we aren't pushing back, and why are there police on my plane? Captain Silas said, standing up for the first time. He towered over the cabin, now his presence filling the space. My name is Silas Grant. I just revoked your fuel authorization. Reynolds frowned. Revoked? What are you talking about? The truck's already fueled us. Check your flow manifest, Silas said, gesturing to the window. Reynolds leaned over seat 1A and looked out the window. Below, on the rainy tarmac, the massive Ares Logistics fuel truck, which had been connected to the wing, was decoupling. The driver was on a radio. Then a second truck waiting for the flight next to them turned its lights off, and began to drive away. Across the tarmac, 4 other Aries trucks were stopping their operations. "My drivers listened to me," Silas said. "I just sent a fleet-wide stop order. No more gas for Atlantic Sovereign until I say so." Reynolds turned pale. "Sir, you can't do that. We have 300 passengers on board. We have a schedule, and I had a seat," Silas said. "A seat that I paid for. A seat that your lead attendant tried to steal because she thought a black man in a hoodie couldn't possibly be the CEO of the company that keeps your birds in the air." The captain turned his furious gaze to Tiffany. She was sobbing quietly near the galley, her mascara running down her cheeks. "Tiffany, Captain Reynolds," said, his voice shaking with suppressed anger. "What did you do? I didn't know," she sobbed. "He didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a thug." The word hung in the air. Thug. Silas smiled, but there was no humor in it. "And there it is, the truth." He turned to the rest of the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the inconvenience, but this flight is canceled." "You can't cancel the flight," Preston York yelled, jumping up. "I have a meeting in London. I will sue you. I will sue this airline into the ground." Silas turned to Preston. "Mr. York." "Preston, I know who you are. You run York Capital. You're leveraged to the hilt on short positions in the tech sector, aren't you?" Preston froze. That's private information." "It's market analysis," Silas corrected. "And you should know that Ares Logistics moves the server farms for 3 of the companies you're betting against. I know their supply chains better than you know your own portfolio. If you miss your meeting in London, it's not going to be the lawsuit that kills you. It's the margin call." Preston sank back into his seat, defeated. Officer Kowalski, who was still standing there awkwardly, cleared his throat. "So, Mr. Grant, am I arresting anyone?" "Yes," Silas said. He pointed to Tiffany. "I want to file charges for filing a false police report. She accused me of having a bomb. That is a federal crime. Arrest her." Tiffany screamed, "No, no, please. It was a mistake." And Silas added, pointing to Preston, "I want him removed for harassment and solicitation. He tried to bribe a passenger and created a hostile environment." "This is insane," Preston sputtered. "Captain," Silas said to the pilot, "this plane isn't going anywhere until the fuel paperwork is resigned, and I'm not signing it while these 2 are on board. In fact, I'm not signing it while I'm on board. I'm getting off." Silas grabbed his carry-on bag. "I'll take my business to British Airways. I hear they check tickets before they check bank accounts." "Wait," Captain Reynolds pleaded. "Mr. Grant, if you walk off and those trucks stay grounded, this entire terminal shuts down. We're talking millions in losses. Please, let's work this out." Silas stopped at the cabin door. He looked back at the luxury, the leather, the panic. "Then fix it," Silas said. "Right now." The captain nodded. He grabbed the handset for the PA system. His voice boomed through the entire aircraft from first class to row 50. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds. We have a situation. We will be returning to the gate immediately. Port Authority will be boarding to remove 2 disruptive individuals who have compromised the integrity of this flight crew. Please remain seated." He looked at Tiffany. "Get your bag, Tiffany. You're done." The karma wasn't just knocking on the door. It had kicked the door down. The return to the gate was a slow, agonizing funeral procession for Tiffany's career. The aircraft, which had been moments away from takeoff, lurched as the tug vehicle pushed it back toward the terminal. The hum of the engines died down, replaced by the murmurs of 300 confused and angry passengers. But in first class, the silence was absolute. Captain Reynolds had come out of the cockpit personally to oversee the transition. He stood by the galley, his arms crossed, watching Tiffany pack her personal items. Her hands were shaking so violently that she dropped her lipstick, the small metal tube clattering loudly on the floor. No one moved to pick it up. "Captain, please," Tiffany whispered, her voice cracking. "I've given 10 years to this airline. You can't let them take me off in cuffs. It was a misunderstanding." I thought he was a security risk. Reynolds looked at her with cold, tired eyes. You profiled a passenger, Tiffany. You lied to the police, and you cost this airline a fuel contract worth $40 million a month. You didn't just break protocol, you broke the company. The cabin door opened. The jet bridge hummed into place. Officer Kowalski, now looking significantly more humble, stepped aside as two more Port Authority officers entered. These weren't the beat cops. These were the supervisors. Tiffany Miller, the lead officer asked. Tiffany nodded, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. You are under arrest for filing a false police report and inducing panic on a commercial aircraft. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was the loudest sound in the world. As they marched her down the aisle, she looked at Silas. He was still sitting in seat 1A, calmly typing on his phone. He didn't look up. He didn't gloat. To him, she had ceased to exist the moment she tried to dehumanize him. Then they turned to Preston York. Mr. York, the officer said, we're escorting you off as well. The captain has deemed you a threat to the safety of the flight crew due to attempted bribery and harassment. I am not going anywhere, Preston screamed, clinging to the armrests of seat 1B. Do you know who my lawyers are? I will own this airport. I will sue that man in 1A for everything he has. Preston, stop it. The voice came from row 4. It was Lydia Preston's wife. She had stood up holding her purse. She walked up the aisle, not toward Preston, but toward Silas. She stopped at seat 1A, Mr. Grant. Silas finally looked up. He saw a woman who looked exhausted, embarrassed, and done. I am so sorry, Lydia said, her voice steady. My husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, is a fool. He sees the world as things to be bought. I apologize for his behavior. It was disgusting. Silas studied her face, then nodded once. Thank you, Mom. You have a flight to catch. I suggest you stay on board. Once the garbage is taken out, this plane will fly. Lydia turned to Preston, who was being pried out of his seat by the officers. I'm staying, Preston. Don't call me when you make bail. Lydia, you can't leave me here. Preston howled as the officers dragged him backward down the aisle, his expensive suit bunched up his shoes, scuffing the floor. I'm Preston York. I'm a Diamond member. The last thing the first-class cabin saw of Preston York was his flailing legs as he was hauled onto the jet bridge. When the door finally closed again, the silence in the cabin was different. It wasn't tense anymore. It was respectful. Captain Reynolds walked over to Silas. Mr. Grant, they are off the plane. The police report has been filed. Atlantic Sovereign will issue a formal apology to you within the hour. He paused, looking nervous about the fuel. Silas looked out the window. The rain had stopped. He picked up his satellite phone and dialed a short code. Arthur, it's Silas. Restore the flow, but tell the drivers to prioritize every other airline first. Atlantic Sovereign waits until last in the queue. They can fly, but they're going to be late. Let them think about why. Silas hung up. He stood, grabbed his bag, and looked at the captain. I'm not flying with you today, Captain. I have a principle about staying where I'm not wanted, but for the sake of the people in economy who just want to get home to their families. You have your fuel. Silas Grant walked off the plane on his own terms. As he stepped onto the jet bridge, the passengers in first class, the judge, the tech influencer, even the tired diplomat began to clap. It wasn't a polite golf clap. It was a slow, rhythmic applause of respect, but the story didn't end on the tarmac. Real karma takes time to cook. The tarmac at JFK was just the beginning. The real war, the one that would destroy lives and cement legends, didn't happen in the rain. It happened on the internet, in boardrooms, and in the cold, fluorescent-lit hallways of federal carousels. While Silas Grant was quietly arranging alternative transport to London via a competitor, the passenger in seat 2B, a tech entrepreneur named Jackson Cole, with 1.22 million subscribers, was sitting in the airport lounge. His hands were shaking not from fear, but from the adrenaline of what he had just witnessed. He had his laptop open. He wasn't checking emails, he was editing. Jackson had captured everything. He had the audio of Tiffany's sneering condensation. He had the video of Preston York throwing the cash. But most importantly, he had the crystal clear footage of the moment Arthur Sterling's voice beamed over the speakerphone, calling Silas the king of fuel, and the look of absolute soul-crushing terror on Tiffany's face when she realized she had profiled the wrong man. Jackson didn't add music. He didn't add a commentary track. He simply titled the video Flight Attendant and Hedge Fund Guy Try to Bully Black CEO Regret Instantly. He hit upload. By the time Silas landed in Heathrow 7 hours later, the world had changed. The video didn't just go viral, it became a cultural event. Within 3 hours, it had 4 million views. By the next morning, it was the #1 trending topic globally on X, formerly Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. The hashtag Jutka Grounded by Grant began to trend. But it wasn't just people cheering for Silas. The internet detectives, the ruthless, sleepless hive mind of social media, went to work. They didn't just watch the video, they dissected it. They identified Tiffany within 40 minutes. Her LinkedIn profile was found screenshotted and shared across thousands of forums before she could even delete it. They found her old posts, some of which displayed the same subtle elitist attitudes she had shown on the plane. Then they found Preston York. Preston had made the fatal mistake of screaming his own name and his status level. "I'm Preston York. I'm a Diamond member." Became the soundbite of the year. Remixes of his voice over clown music were circulating on TikTok before lunch. But for the financial sector, it wasn't a joke. It was blood in the water. Tiffany didn't go home after being escorted off the plane. She was taken directly to a holding room at the Port Authority precinct at JFK. The room was cold, painted a depressing shade of institutional beige. For 3 hours, she sat on a metal bench still in her Atlantic Sovereign uniform, watching the mascara stain her pristine white collar. When the door finally opened, it wasn't a lawyer. It was Martha Higgins, the Regional Director of Human Resources for Atlantic Sovereign, accompanied by a man in a sharp suit who carried a briefcase that looked heavier than lead. "Tiffany," Martha said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was clinical. It was the voice of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. "This is Mr. Henderson, legal counsel for the airline." "Martha, please," Tiffany begged, standing up. "You have to help me. It was a mistake. I was stressed. The protocol says, Mr. Henderson interrupted, placing a tablet on the table. Does not include fabricating a terrorist threat because you want to give a seat to a man with a nicer watch. Watch this. He played the video, Jackson Cole's footage." Tiffany watched herself. She saw the sneer. She heard her own voice lie about the detonator. She saw the millions of views ticking up in the corner. That video represents a brand impact estimated at $60 million in lost bookings over the next quarter. Henderson said the board of directors is out for blood. "Tiffany, they need a sacrifice, and frankly, you handed them the knife." Am I fired?" she whispered. Martha placed a letter on the table. "Termination is effective immediately for cause. Gross misconduct. Filing a false federal report. Discrimination. But that's the least of your problems." Henderson leaned in. "The district attorney is charging you under 18 U.S. Code Poragara 1038. False information and hoaxes. It's a felony because you used the word detonator on an active aircraft. You triggered a federal anti-terror response protocol. The airline is cooperating fully with the prosecution. We are not providing you with legal counsel. You are on your own." Tiffany collapsed back onto the bench. The airline, the identity she had wrapped herself in for 10 years. The shield she used to look down on others had just discarded her like a used napkin. 6 months later, the hard karma settled into a grim reality. Tiffany pleaded guilty to avoid a 3-year prison sentence. She received 3 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a permanent placement on the FAA's no-fly exclusionary list. She could never work for an airline again. She couldn't even work at an airport Hudson newsstand. The last report on her whereabouts placed her in a small town in Ohio, working the drive-thru at a fast food chain. One afternoon, a customer in a luxury SUV pulled up to the window. Tiffany handed him his bag, keeping her head down. "Hey," the man said. "Wait, you're that flight attendant, right? The one who tried to bounce the CEO." Tiffany froze. The shame hit her like a physical blow. "Keep the change," the man said, tossing a nickel at her. "Buy yourself some manners." She watched him drive away, the tears hot on her face. She had treated Silas Grant like he was invisible. Now she wished she could be. If Tiffany's fall was tragic, Preston York's was catastrophic. Preston York ran York Capital, a hedge fund that thrived on volatility. He was a man who believed money was the only law that mattered. He had spent his life bullying waitstaff, undercutting partners, and leveraging assets he didn't own. He thought he was untouchable. He was wrong. Silas Grant had warned him on the plane. "It's not the lawsuit that kills you, it's the margin call." The video went viral on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, Wall Street had seen it. In the high-stakes world of finance, reputation is currency. Investors trust you with their millions because they believe you are disciplined, rational, and in control. The video showed Preston York as an erratic, emotional, racist liability who screamed at pilots and tried to bribe passengers. At 8:30 a.m. on Wednesday, Preston walked into his office in Midtown Manhattan. He was out on bail, having spent the night in a holding cell. He looked disheveled. He barked at his receptionist. "Get me coffee." She didn't move. She was packing a box. "Did you hear me?" Preston snapped. "I quit, Preston," she said, not looking up. "Check the news or check the stock ticker." Preston ran into his office and pulled up his Bloomberg terminal. His face went gray. The Ares Logistics nuclear option had triggered a domino effect. Because Silas had publicly called out Preston's short positions on the plane, the market reacted. The Reddit army, the same retail investors who had rallied around GameStop, saw Silas as a hero and Preston as the ultimate villain. They started mass buying the very tech stocks Preston was betting against. The prices of those stocks soared. Preston was short, meaning every dollar the stock went up was money he owed. He was losing millions by the minute. Then came the phone call. It wasn't his lawyer. It was the risk management department of Goldman Sachs, his prime broker. "Mr. York," the voice said, cold and final. "This is a margin call. Your liquidity has dropped below the maintenance requirement. We need you to post $50 million in collateral within the hour, or we will begin liquidating your positions." "50 million!" Preston screamed, slamming his fist on the mahogany desk. "I don't have 50 million liquid. It's tied up in the Hamptons estate. It's in the yacht. Give me 24 hours. You don't have 24 hours, Preston. You have the internet betting against you. And frankly, after seeing that video, we are reevaluating our relationship with your capital. You have 45 minutes. Preston scrambled. He called his partners. They didn't pick up. He called his friends from the golf club. They sent him to voicemail. He was toxic radioactive. By 4 p.m. that day, York Capital was insolvent. The bank seized his trading accounts. The firm was dissolved, but the personal blow was the one that truly broke him. That evening, Preston returned to his penthouse on Park Avenue, the only asset he thought was safe. The lights were off. The house was silent. "Lydia," he called out. "Lydia, you have to help me. I need to access your trust fund just for a bridge loan." Lydia. He walked into the master bedroom. The closets were empty. The jewelry safe was open and empty. On the bed, there was a single manila envelope. Inside were divorce papers. Lydia hadn't just left. She had launched a preemptive strike. Her lawyers had attached a copy of the viral video to the filing, citing irreconcilable behavior and public endangerment. Because Preston's meltdown had occurred in a public setting and endangered her safety, she had grounds to annul the prenuptial agreement. She took the dog. She took the artwork. And because Preston's assets were frozen by the SEC pending an investigation into his firm's collapse, Lydia was the only one with access to cash. 2 weeks later, Preston York was spotted not at the Ritz, but at a pawn shop in Queens, trying to sell his gold Rolex. The broker behind the counter looked at the watch, then looked at Preston. "I can give you $4,000, the broker said. $4,000. Preston sputtered, his voice cracking. "This is a $40,000 timepiece. It's a day-date president." "Yeah," the broker shrugged. "And you look like a guy who needs bail money. Take it or leave it." Preston took the cash. As he walked out into the rain, he realized he was finally sitting in economy class, while Tiffany and Preston burned Silas Grant Rose. The grounding of the Atlantic Sovereign flight had caused a massive disruption. Yes. But when the full story came out, confirmed by the police report and the video, the narrative shifted instantly. Ares Logistics didn't just survive the incident, they thrived. The Clause 14 maneuver Silas pulled became legendary in business schools. It was dubbed the Grant Maneuver. The idea that a company's values are a tangible asset worth protecting at any cost. 3 major airlines canceled their contracts with rival fuel suppliers and signed with Ares Logistics solely based on Silas's reputation for integrity. They wanted to be in business with the man who wouldn't be bought and couldn't be bullied. The company's valuation jumped 18% in the quarter following the incident. But for Silas, the victory wasn't in the stock price. It was in the change he forced upon the industry. Atlantic Sovereign Airlines, desperate to save face, launched a massive internal audit. They fired their entire VP level of customer experience. They implemented mandatory rigorous bias training for all 40,000 employees. And in a move to publicly apologize, they created the Grant Scholarship, a fully funded program for underprivileged youth to attend aviation school. Arthur Sterling, the director of operations who had shouted down the police officer, flew to London personally to meet Silas. They met in a quiet coffee shop in Mayfair. Arthur looked tired. Silas looked at peace. "We lost the fuel contract for JFK. Silas, Arthur said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. "That cost us $60 million this year alone, but I think we deserved it." Silas took a sip of his black coffee. "You did, Arthur. You built a culture where a diamond card meant more than human dignity. Tiffany wasn't the disease. She was just a symptom." "We want you back," Arthur said. "We're prepared to offer a premium of 20% above market rate. And we want you to sit on our diversity and inclusion board. We need your oversight." Silas looked at the contract. It was a lot of money, enough to give every employee at Ares a massive Christmas bonus. "I'll sign the fuel contract," Silas said, pulling a pen from his jacket. "My drivers need the work, but I won't sit on your board." "Why not?" "Because," Silas said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "I don't need to be on your board to keep you honest, Arthur. I just need to be a passenger. If I ever step on one of your planes again and see someone being treated like I was, I won't just ground one plane. I'll ground the fleet." Arthur nodded, swallowing hard. "Understood, Mr. Grant." A month later, Silas was at JFK again. He was flying to Tokyo for a summit. He walked up to the gate for Japan Airlines. He was wearing the same charcoal hoodie jeans and scuffed leather sneakers. He approached the counter. The agent, a young woman named Sarah, looked at his passport, then looked at him. Her eyes went wide. She recognized him instantly. Everyone did now. She didn't sneer. She didn't ask if he was in the wrong line. She stood up, straightened her uniform, and smiled. A genuine, warm smile of respect. "Mr. Grant," she said, "it is an honor to have you flying with us today. I have your seat right here." One of Silas smiled back. It wasn't the smile of a conqueror. It was the smile of a man who had fought a war so that he didn't have to fight anymore. "Thank you, Sarah," Silas said softly. As he walked down the jet bridge, he didn't put his headphones on immediately. He listened to the sounds of the airport, the chaos, the announcements, the movement of thousands of people. He walked into the first-ass cabin, found his seat, and sat down. He looked out the window at the fueling trucks below. He saw the Ares Logistics logo on the side of the tanker. The driver was down there in the rain doing the hard work that kept the world moving. Silas tapped the glass gently, a silent salute to his team. He closed his eyes, finally able to get some sleep. The plane pushed back, the engines roared to life, and Silas Grant took flight not just as a CEO, but as the man who grounded the arrogance of the world and won. And that is how Silas Grant turned a moment of disrespect into a movement of justice. It wasn't about the seat. It was never about the seat. It was about drawing a line in the sand and saying, "Not today." Tiffany lost her career because she couldn't see past her own prejudice. Preston lost his fortune because he thought money made him invincible. But Silas, he won because he knew that true power is quiet, patient, and absolutely undeniable. It's a harsh lesson, but a necessary one. Be careful who you step on, because you might just be stepping on the person holding the keys to your future. Now I want to hear from you. If you were Silas, would you have signed the contract with Atlantic Sovereign again, or would you have let them starve? Was the punishment for Tiffany and Preston too harsh, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And subscribe for more stories where karma strikes back hard. Turn on that notification bell so you never miss a drama. Until next time, stay humble and fly.